Let's go to the phone lines and talk to somebody that I've known for a long, long time, Mr. Larry Kemp, defensive coordinator, hopefully beginning his second season this upcoming fall with the Niles McKinley Red Dragons. How you doing, Coach?
I'm good, John. How about yourself?
I'm doing okay. What's going on with the Kemp family and the COVID-19? What are you guys doing?
Well, we do a lot of traveling. Aerial America on the Smithsonian Channel has us traveling quite a bit. Just got back from California. There's not much you can do. You watch a little bit of TV. You go outside and you sit on a deck if it's a nice day. My wife Trace is doing her schoolwork online. She teaches at Niles. So, we're doing what everybody else is doing, John, just trying to maintain.
It sounds like a lot of fun. I'm watching cable TV yesterday, and if you're not watching a Governor Mike DeWine update, I'm watching a documentary on sand. I'm not kidding you, and I'm like, really? Is this what we've reduced ourselves to? Documentaries on sand. I got to talk to you about your career. First of all, very much associated with the Niles McKinley football program. But coming back to Niles, and you've been there for so long, what did it feel like becoming defensive coordinator under Jim Perry? And you have a veteran staff yourself. You've been coaching forever, and Bill Boren. You guys 7-3 last year, no playoffs, but you started out red hot. You were 4-0, and then you did win your last two, so you ended with momentum. I would say the high water mark of the campaign was beating South Range in Week 6 in that thrilling double overtime affair, 35-34. But still, in rugged Division III, it was tough to get to the postseason despite winning 7 of 10 regular season games.
Well, yeah, you're right, John. We're in Division III. We figured out if we were in 2 or 4, we'd be in the playoffs. But we are where we are, and we don't complain about it. I think realistically, we knew that we had to win 8 games to get into the playoffs. And, we fell games short, and, you take responsibility for that. We have great kids. Jimmy has done a great job. The thing with me coming back, I am now coaching with former students and former players of mine, all who, do a great job. Jimmy's our head coach. He's had success at Matthews and at Niles. Brian Ulrich, who actually is our DC. Brian, I coached in football and baseball, and it was a student. Ryan Barrett, who came over from Boorman, Chris Marsico, and Carl Witt. Those guys aren't Niles guys, but they are through injection right now. Our offensive side, we got Jimmy Perry, we got my son Paul, Jake Connell, Kyle Leonard. These guys all do a great job in what they do. And again, they're Niles guys, so they understand what's going on and the expectations of where we want to get to.
We're talking to Larry Kemp, second-year defensive coordinator with the Niles McKinley Red Dragons under head coach Jim Perry. I got to tell you, Larry, you're like a boomerang. You just can't stay away from Niles. I don't care where you venture off to. Larry Kemp's always going to come back to Niles. On a serious note, much like Bill Walker, who was a longtime assistant at McDonald, I didn't think that Larry Kemp was ever going to become a head coach. There are certain guys, and Don Prologo, until recently, in taking the Warren JFK job from Jeff Bayuk, might be one of those guys that had fallen into that category prior to this year. But there's certain guys that love the role of being an assistant as opposed to a head coach. What are your thoughts on that? Before, I know you took over the Ursuline program for about 7 years.
Yeah, if you want to coach football, you'll coach football and do whatever you want to do. My time, I actually started in Niles when I was 19 years old with Tony Napolet. I left and went to Latonia. I came back to Niles under Jack Pearson, great guy who you know the family well. Bill Leonard and Dave Papita left and went to Girard with Joe Jeswell. Came back under Bill Bourne. Went to Matthews with Jimmy up at Matthews, and he had success at Matthews. And then went to Ursuline. I think if you want to be a head coach, you better know what you're doing, and you have to have a lot of different hats that you're wearing. Got the opportunity at Ursuline. I had 15 wonderful years at Ursuline. Didn't end the way I wanted it to. That happens. That's part of the game. But when I had my conversations with Jimmy Perry a couple Well, 2 winters ago, all I told him is I just want to coach football. I don't need a title. I don't want anything. I just want to coach football because that's what I love to do, John.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. So when you were as a head coach at Ursuline, and your specialties, defensive side of the football as a coordinator, Larry, did you feel that you mentioned you had to wear so many different hats and you had to organize everything? You had to run the offense, the special teams, the defense, and you had to deal with booster clubs and various whatnot. So did you feel taking away from your specialty and what you do best on the defensive side of the ball?
Well, I think you have to organize your time. You have, I as the head coach over on the north side, I didn't miss a booster meeting, whether it was in season, off season. There are functions that you had to do that you can go to. You had to do a lot of different things, which were taken away from, your football. But if you budget your time and do it correctly, all that is, very, very well. You can manage that. The one thing I don't miss, truthfully, about being a head coach is, now I don't have to go to the functions. I don't have to fundraise. I don't have to do the things that, Jimmy has to do, or, even like Dan had to do. And, Dan came back to Ursuline. There's a lot of things. I don't have to do that. We're done. We sit. We talk about, the practice. We talk about the game. And then, you go. My phone's not ringing. And if it is, I don't answer it. So,
you talked about your time at Ursuline, and you were part of 3 state titles there with defensive coordinator under Dan. And I remember covering one of those games, and it was just a classic finish about how the Irish would come back and win the championships. And it was a great time for you in your life. In fact, your son, Paul, was also with you as a member of that team and then would later go on to coach with you.
Yeah, Paul had a great career at Ursuline. His record at Ursuline was 41-3 as a starting quarterback. Very few people can say that, with those 4 years, that senior class Paul was a part of, they played in 4 state championship games, winning three of the 4, and it was a great time, But everything fell in line. We had great kids. They were coached well, and, we were lucky. And you better not, if you don't think luck has anything to do with it, you're greatly mistaken. Like us last year, Paul's on staff with us over at Niles, and he grew up on Niles football because when he was born, I think he was 3 or 4. He was in the car coming to practice with me, so it's kind of a homecoming for him also. We beat Alliance. And we had to come back and beat Alliance last year. We beat South Range. We had to come back and beat South Range. And I think that shows the determination of the coaches, Jim and all the guys, and also, the kids. The kids, they want to win. And, they did everything we asked them to do. And, you're blessed with that, John.
I got to ask you, and I read an article not long ago. When you came aboard with equal fella legend Bill Boren, Jim Perry, I don't think he's even 40 years old. I think he graduated, in 1990. And Coach Perry himself said, you know what, it's kind of weird for me to be schooling and instructing these veterans, and I'm not going to lie to you, it's going to take some adjustment. And I know that you and Coach Boren went in there underneath him, despite all your experience, and said, hey, man, we're just here to help.
Yeah, and that's where we are. Bill has blamed me for everything from the Chicago fire to probably the corona right now. He's always, he calls me a black-hearted Irishman, and anything goes wrong, he'll look at me and he says, this is because of you. And I laugh, I laugh with Bill. But there you have you look at a guy, he's a Hall of Famer. Jimmy does a great job of running his program. And when Bill was a head coach, he had his program. When I was a head coach, I had my program. And Jimmy has a great program. And one of the signs, I was thinking about this morning, there isn't one assistant coach on our current staff who ducks the weight room. Brian Ulrich is in there. And I got to give a shout out to Brian because he's a nurse. And we haven't heard from Brian since all this stuff is going by. So we hope that, he's safe and keeping, what, doing his job. So Brian's there, Jake's there, I'm there, Bill's there. Bill's a sneaky one, though, John.
That's a sneaky one.
Yeah, you'll see Bill, and then all of a sudden you see him prancing down a hallway which leads to the exit. Doesn't say goodbye, nothing. But he'll kind of, ghost a little bit on you. Paul's been in there. Paul coaches baseball at Ursuline, so he's kind of out of the weight room. Well, we're all out. Chris Marsico's a basketball coach in Niles. Ryan Barrett's a track guy and Boardman. But, nobody's ducking the weight room. And it's so important that the kids see all the assistant coaches as well as your head coach there. And Jimmy's done a great job of that.
Larry, when people describe you, and I've talked to many people about you, and I've known you for many years, fiery, competitive, motivated, would you agree with those assessments?
Well, I love the game of football. And I think if you're an athlete, and I know, I'm well aware of your career over in McDonald and with the Liberty Little Leopards, guys that I'm no different than anybody else. If I'm going to invest the time, I'm going to do it the right way. Regardless if I was at Gerard Wajez or I was at Ursuline or, with Dave Papita and even when I was on, I first got into coaching, you got to do it the right way. Some people, they kind of look at me at times. I'm sure they go, what a backside he is. But there's no act there. I am who I am. And, I think the one thing you have to do, John, and I think this is very important, you've got to get kids to trust in you and believe that you're not a phony. Because kids today are smart. They know the guy who doesn't know what he's talking about, and they know the people who do, and they'll gravitate to you if you're honest and upfront and, kind of wear your emotions on the sleeve a little bit. And I think that's why I've been successful in what I'm doing.
I think this is a fair question, too. For someone that's been doing it as long as you and has the knowledge, the wisdom, and experience, how has the coaching industry changed in terms of how players are treated? There was a time, Coach Kemp, and I'll use Bobby Knight or Woody Hayes, for example, when you can get in a kid's face, you can berate him, you could do this, you can do that. And they were heralded as legends and iconic figures, and ironically by the players themselves and sometimes the parents of the kids who sent them off to play for a Woody Hayes or a Bobby Knight. Today, it's different. You can't quite do it like you used to.
Well, from when we play, John, and I'm a little older than you are, I played for Knapp. I was scared to death.
Mm-hmm.
Pat Merritt.
There was a fear and a respect, was there not?
Oh, there's absolutely. I respected it because I knew what they were doing. Now, never got manhandled at all. But they got into your grill quite a bit. I think you can still be that type of person. I don't think you need to put your hands on anybody. There's no reason for that. And that was like a Bobby Knight. And people say, well, I'm competitive. That's not being competitive. You're a teacher. When you coach, you're a teacher. And, I taught for 33 years, and there's a way to do it. When you kick the kid in the backside, you better put your arm around him, take him, and say, hey, listen, this is why you're in the doghouse. Here's what you need to do to get out of that doghouse. And, kids accept that. Coming back to Niles after being gone for 16 years, I was gone. And, one kid came up, and numerous kids came up. Hey, Coach, I think you had my mother in class. Oh, yeah, probably.
Oh, boy. Talk about feeling old.
Yeah, probably. Just as long as I think you had my grandfather in class. When that goes, I'm done.
That's crossing the line right there with Grandpa.
Oh, man. It's getting closer, though. I got to believe it's getting a little closer. But, kids will, if they believe in you and they trust you, John, they'll let you coach them hard. And that's the only way I've known how to coach is, let's do it. I still stay in contact with a lot of former players from every school, every stop I was at, and I'm very fortunate, man, that they still reach out to me.
We're on YSN's Breaking Batch with second-year Niles McKinley defensive coordinator and a longtime friend, Larry Kempe, with me. You mentioned some legends, Tony Napolet, Jack Pearson, Bill Leonard, Dave Papita, Bill Boren. You work with all of these guys extensively. I would say they would make up the main resume for you of your experience, and that is a who's who of coaches. What did each teach you? Let's start with Tony Napolet.
Well, Nappy, the one thing that Nappy taught, and I firmly believe this, is he is firm and fair. And, he's, the one thing I played for Nap and I coached with Nap, and he was always, he's going to talk to you, he's going to teach you, but the guy was firm and very fair. I had known Jack Pearson my entire life because I went to the Catholic grade school over in McDonald. So, young Jack and I are very good friends, as well as the rest of them. Jack had a calmer demeanor than did Nappy, but always got the point across. A different way of sending the message out. Dave Papita, a heck of a player and Bill Leonard, heck of players at Niles. And Dave, we had good success with Dave. And again, had a great staff. The one thing that you learn from all these guys, number one, is surround yourself with good people. And they will help make your job a heck of a lot easier. Jez is, Joe Jeswell, who, taught at Girard and was the head coach and DC also. You've got to learn. You learn from each and every one. Take the good, examine what you thought was bad, and how can you turn it to be a positive for you and your program. And I think smart guys do that, John.
I remember you coached on the staff with, I believe, my father in 1981, and Dave Mock was there, and under Jack Pearson. And I remember Dad always telling me, he goes, my gosh, we were in that film room for a long time. And Jack loved his film sessions, did he not?
Oh, man, I tell you, because we were playing on Saturday nights at that time. And, a couple things, your dad, who I love your father. What a great guy. Even after, years when I hadn't seen him, I'd be in Sparkle and Girard, and he'd come in, and always a hug and a kiss. Coach, how you doing? I don't think he ever called me by my first name. It was always Coach. And, I appreciated the respect. And, your dad, when he comes in there and it's Sunday meetings and we start at 8 and we're done at 7, either it's Dave Mock wanting lunch to happen quickly. He used to call it groceries.
Yeah.
Dave would say, where's the groceries? And your dad, and I looked at your dad a couple times, and he goes, does this end? I go, no, it doesn't. And on that staff, too, was Jimmy Lowers.
Oh, Jimmy, yeah, great coach.
An outstanding football coach. And Fireball, Brian Fedeschi, you got to throw his name. Oh, I'd bust Brian's backside all the time. When you bring his name up, I go, you better get some residual from John.
He does owe me. He does owe me.
Oh, believe me, he owes a lot of us, John. He owes a lot of us. But, there are great guys on that staff. And that's the one thing in coaching that I really love. I love being around the guys. Right now, I'm coaching with kids that I taught and coached. And maybe Bill's right. Sometimes I lead them down a bad path, but they quickly follow.
And Coach, when I think back about Niles and the illustrious history, and I think you were quoted as saying at one time, there's no place like home. And Niles is home to you, 33 years, and this is your second go-around. Coach, teacher, the history, Bo Ryan Stadium, Bo Ryan playing for the Niles McKinley Red Dragons, and Tony Mason, and those great games. That was bigger than life football at one time in the 1950s and throughout the 1960s. You went to a Red Dragon game. That was headline news. They were playing Massillon and Cincinnati Roger Bacon and the best across the state. And Niles operated like the premier Division I school in the entire state of Ohio. It really was that way at one point.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's a blessing and a curse. The blessing of that time period, they had a lot of success, churned out a lot of great athletes, D1 athletes, and also some outstanding football coaches. The problem in Niles is they hung on to the 60s a little too much. And it kind of robbed the kids of the 70s, the 80s, their time. There's a day in the sun where we had great success, under Dave Papita, under Jack Pearson, Bill Leonard, even Bill Bourne. We made the playoffs a number of times. And everybody will always go back and look at it. But right now, John, if you talk to one of the players from the 60s, they come and watch us practice because, Jim Perry, kind of breaks my backside a little bit and says, it's like the Johnny Carson show. Who's the guest that's going to come and see practice today? Well, these guys from the 60s, they come and, they like what they see. And that's a tribute to Jim. And listen, nobody wants to bring back that passion for Niles football more than Jimmy. And he works very hard at it. He brings his youngest daughter, Jillian, he brings her to weights. And she does the drills with the guys. I told her one day, I said, you got to get new shoes. Get your father to buy you a pair of shoes. You're in these clod hoppers that girls wear. And I said, you're going to break your ankle, dear. But, in our time, we're doing the right things to bring Niles football on a consistent level of success. And that's a tribute to Jim and the guys.
And I love that about Jim, despite the fact that, he's sitting here with two legendary veterans underneath him as assistants on his staff. You did make mention of the fact that nobody respects history more and wants to restore Niles football as best as possible to what it had been. And maybe there is, to some degree, Larry Kemp, people in the community of Niles looking back to the past fondly, and sometimes you can never recapture that. But you can come close if you have a successful staff, and that's exactly what you guys are doing. And I thought 7-3 was a brilliant start last year.
Well, the year before, I think they were 4-6. The first year Jim was the head coach, and you always hear stories. You're in a different program. I was on the north side of Youngstown. I'd hear stories and all this, and it came that Jimmy, and I got to tell you quickly, I'm sitting at home, and I had a couple offers to go be a head coach again, and just didn't think the time was right for me to jump back into that. And I got a text message from Jim, and it basically read, I'd do myself a disfavor if I didn't at least reach out and see if you had any interest. And, we had 3 meetings, and they were in a private place. They weren't in the city of Niles. And, all I said was, he gave me here's the staff, here's what we need, here's where we're deficient, and they were great conversations. And my first statement to Jim was, I said, now, you got Bill, who knows more football than both of us and has been around more football than both of us. Can you handle Bill and I in our personalities? Because I haven't changed since I coached you. He goes, I have no problem. He goes, we're going to make this work. In the second meeting, I said, I would like to talk to Brian, who's the DC, and I said, Brian, do you have any problems? I'm looking at, I'm not going to come walk into that situation and, make waves or, piss people off. And to Jim's credit, he takes everything, he examines it, and whatever's best for what we're doing. And our staff gets along great. We win a game, there's a little post celebration, and we're back to work Saturday morning. And, we get along as, we're friends, and we're also colleagues, and we get along well coaching together. And I think that's a tribute to Jim. And, given time, the thing that I think really bothers us is, people say, Okay, you had one good year. Well, it's the body of work. Look at the body of work when it's all said and done. And, that's where we're going to gauge our success.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I met Jim last year at a coach's session, and I was impressed with him. And it sounds like you are too, and so is Bill Boren. And nothing but the best to the Red Dragons, Larry Kempe. And I personally want to thank you too. Went back and looked in some of our archives here. You've always been a big contributor and a big supporter for YSN and DJ Oakley, and we sincerely appreciate that, Coach.
Well, it was a great getting in on the ground floor with Steve Leslie and DJ. I'm glad to see you and Mr. Know-It-All Ronnie Potesta and
that's about right.
Todd Thorne. Listen, I always say this about Ron, John. He's a great athletic supporter.
I love my colleague. I had a lot of fun with him last fall. And Larry, that little event we had prior to the season, I'll never forget that, man. That was great camaraderie. Larry Kempe, thank you so much. Nothing but the best to the Red Dragons in 2020, and hopefully high school football starts on time, brother.
Well, we as long as everybody's safe and healthy, we'll start it when they tell us.
All right, that's Larry Kempe from Niles, the second-year defensive coordinator